Earth has been a prison for a long time now. Until recently, most clues have been hidden from the eyes of the public. But since the planet was locked down, the elites have been shoving the truth in our face. We have no rights. We can ask no questions. We are not free people. If we don't obey their rules, we will be placed in solitary with all the other troublemakers. Sometime back in the 90s, there was a passing fad for wearing baggy jeans. Ones that barely hung by a thread and bunched up around the knees. It became the norm for a while, and soon enough, every guy under 20 was flashing their boxers and dragging their jeans on the ground. Some years later, I learned that it was prison etiquette to wear jeans low on the hip. It was something that new inmates did to show that they were available, fresh meat as it were. Before the labels got in on the act, denim was made for the poor and downtrodden, because it was cheap and hard-wearing. But by the 80s, with a little PR magic and a few celebrity endorsements, denim rose like a phoenix in the world of fashion, and at least for a while became the epitome of glamour and style. You know, fashion is a fix, a racket to put you in a uniform. Corporate brands are just like gangs, bullying everyone to join them, swearing allegiance through cash and free advertising. Because if you wear labels, you're doing their work for them. When I was a kid, we cut off the labels and threw them away, but now they'll double the price of almost any piece of cheap Chinese tat. You wouldn't believe how many aspects of modern culture can find their roots in the prison system. In my early 20s, when I first got with my wife, we arranged to meet for lunch at Canterbury University. The whole campus had been designed by a prison architect. You could tell, every corridor a rat run, tiny windows, and such a confusing floor plan. It'd give MC Escher a run for his money. It ended up as a running joke, named after the labyrinthine building. We called it the Rutherford effect. Essentially every building on the campus was a mirror of the next. The layout was identical, but flipped on its head. So left was right, and right was left. It's easier to make a prison disorientating than escape-proof. Take a look at any shopping mall, if you can still find one. They all have high walls, no windows, security on the perimeter, and even watchtowers for the guards. Big box stores have been built on the cheap, like giant steel sheds. It's all for us, whoever's left. A final resting place for the goons and the gullible idiots that thought they'd be invited to the New World Order party. What about tattoos? I can't recall anyone from my childhood who'd even considered getting a tattoo. In fact, most ardent fans of the art were ex-cons. In prison, where tattoos are a matter of survival, they can help form allegiances and find security, and all you have to do is give up some more of your individuality. Some fashionistas are even up for scarring, laser and acid-etched designer tattoos. Farmyard cattle have no choice when they're branded. It's so the farmer can identify them. I guess the same can be said for the human herd. The word lockdown is prison terminology. It's something they do to inmates during a riot. During the first year of the lockdown, people in Britain took to banging pots and pans and cheering for the NHS. It's funny, they should have been protesting, and instead they were cheering on the tyranny. So where's the riot? Is that why life's been put on hold for the foreseeable future? Are we really that dangerous? I've seen a few marches and protests. I've heard a lot of big talk, plans for the future, but nothing even remotely violent enough to justify invoking shadow martial law. I've seen faces come and go, saviours who did not deliver, prophets making profit, but they're all stooges, working their pitch, not holding the line. In fact, they're dancing on it, fleecing the gullible to grab the cash and build their own luxury fortress. As for the chief mouthpieces, you can't tell me that somebody who's earned millions from playing the rebel protagonist isn't somehow complicit. They must have compromised somewhere along the line, made concessions, ducked for cover at the appropriate moment. Anybody with clout who can sway millions of opinions, no matter what their political stand, is a trustee of the prison. They're rewarded for their good behaviour, helping to subdue the anger of the inmates, because there are no real revolutionaries behind bars. Those who have a voice and blurred the lines are offered a transfer to luxury open prisons in far-off climes. That's how the elites work the so-called social credit system. It might not be officially implemented, you can see its sinister effect everywhere on the net. especially with social media spewing out highly specialized, intricately targeted, covertly censored echo chambers to collect data and filter the results. Many of us who roam the fringes of online culture find ourselves in a wasteland of obscurity, hardly ever making an impact on the public eye. Those who feel the same have most likely been placed in solitary confinement. Most won't even realize, because manipulation on a grand enough scale is almost invisible to the majority of the public. You know, there's a big difference between rules and laws. For a law to achieve legal status, it must have precedents. It can't simply be plucked out of the air. But rules, regulations, mandates, that's easy, especially when all your citizens are inmates. It's quite insidious, really, watching our fundamental human rights fall by the wayside, all for the sake of a quiet life, a chance at even coming close to some sense of normality. But it's all too late now. There's no point locking the gate after the horse has bolted. There's no fixing this. We know it, and they know it. It's a Mexican standoff, and the elites have all the firepower. But what they don't have is the upper hand, the moral right, and they know they've already lost their own argument. Locking down well-behaved prisoners doesn't stop riots, it causes them. That's the whole point. They want to rile the people up and watch them tear themselves apart. Did you know that you can buy spiked proteins on the net now? It comes in handy aerosol cans, designed to deliver maximum effect amongst large crowds at public events. Now that's crowd control. Riot control, on the other hand, works on a whole other level. The first thing you need to do is isolate the wing and lock down the cells where the ringleaders are hiding out. Then you might cut off the lights and power, and if things get really bad, you might even consider starving them into submission. Starting to sound familiar yet? Blackmail is not the way to begin a new industrial age. Neither are threats. In fact, the only people who will go along with the new regime enjoy living in prison. If they do what they're told, it's an open prison. There are still rules and travel is a privilege, but for some that's enough, just to scrape by, kowtow to the bullies, and hope to live a few more days with no major injuries on the horizon. Just like prison, almost all state institutions are designed the same way. Their command structure is deliberately obfuscated and hidden from the lower ranks and the general public. The front of house is invariably officious, even cruel, and everything centers around the bottom line. Can government profit from it, or at least cover their costs? Because they already have your money and they don't want to spend it on all their empty promises. They much rather keep most for themselves and spend the rest on propaganda, reinforcing the message 24/7. No matter how friendly the ad campaign, remember, you are only a statistic. It is general and not personal opinion that they must sway. If people don't like what they hear, they are silenced and even punished by the state, reprimanded for eating all the carrots and avoiding the stick. We no longer have shops or banks. Instead, we use devices and gadgets. High-security prisons are practically self-automated these days and hardly need any staff. Most of them will sit behind a screen, monitoring AI surveillance programs modeled for identifying suspicious behavior. Eventually, prisons will be completely unmanned. In fact, they'll be a home, for home is no longer where the heart is, but rather the last refuge of the enemies of the state. The anti-ideologues holding out for individual freedom and personal autonomy, mocked as the Luddites of the transhumanist revolution. Thinking is now the greatest crime of all, and critical thinking is particularly treasonous. Original thought can lead to incitement against a corrupt state, which is why we're kept busy and bored at the same time. No moment to rest, no real peace, and constant light and sound pollution throughout the night. It's what the police like to do to drive their targets insane. They call it music torture. It's psychological warfare. Blast music, sirens, lights, anything to break the siege. Which is why so many bells and buzzers disturb the sleep of the highly connected. Social media breeds insomnia. This world is contained, and those who try to escape are called suicidal maniacs, manic depressives, the insane. For it would be mad to leave all this behind. All this wonderful power and technology, the beautiful lies, the painted walls and ceilings of our prison. We have so much to live for, so much work to carry out, so many years behind bars, waiting for the right to live. Prison is a state of mind and not a state of being. We can escape together, but none must be left behind. The way to effect real change is to admit openly to each other that nothing here is good enough. All self-serving figures of authority must be stripped of power and forced to confess that this world of law and money and existential threat is nothing but a cage to control the unruly masses. We are a whisker away from revolution, yet the human race can no longer rely on itself to make things right. Jail the guards, free the inmates, break the walls down from the outside, and drag everybody kicking and screaming into the light. It's a far-fetched idea, and knowing human nature, it's doubtful that many are ready, for this prison is far too comfortable, and life has become little more for most than an endless list of compromises. There will be riots, but they will be contained, for the only real way to bring down the walls of reality is to agree they no longer exist.